Hello, welcome to episode number 99 in this series, where I am programming an NES game from scratch. And tonight I am streaming on Friday instead of a Thursday. I've also moved the microphone. Hopefully, the audio is clearer because of that. I know that the audio is typically pretty soft, and I had made it a little bit better than some of the earlier streams, but I'm hoping that I will just get over the fact that I don't like having the microphone in the frame, and this will just make it easier for people to hear me. So you can let me know how that sounds, and if you care or not if the microphone is in the frame like that. But otherwise, let's get started here. So just a couple of quick things. There will be no videos or streams next week because I will be traveling for work, so I will not be able to do a video or the normal stream. I'm going to use that time to kind of prepare things for our 100th episode here, which it's pretty exciting that we made it 100 episodes and, gotten some cool things done. It's certainly been an interesting experience getting through programming all of these things on the NES and learning the quirks and features of programming on the NES, and it's a lot tougher than I think I expected in some ways, but at the same time, it's really not too bad. And so related to that, I've talked about it a number of times. Zero Pages episode number 4, related to sort of a getting started Hello World episode that'll be forthcoming here, and and then, like I said, look for episode 100. I have some plans for that, and I will kind of announce them after the episode is out there on YouTube. So without further stalling, let's get started. I'm gonna try and keep this about an hour. The main thing I want to accomplish tonight, other than being on stream, in case people have questions or want to come say hi, is I want to get fixed up some of the functionality related to the collisions that got broken. So in the last stream, we had fixed the functionality for splitting the entity types, right? So we were now split up so that the objects like the ship and the cloud are in one entity list, and the projectiles are in a separate entity list, and that gives us the ability to have more entities in the game. We had modified the script I was using to display the entity lists here to properly handle the second list of entities. And in some of the changes that we made, as I mentioned in Monday's episode, we hit some interesting problems related to the stack placement and that overlapping with our entity list, and then also the sprite memory overlapping with the entity list, and some of the bugs related to that. And once we got that fixed, we started seeing things kind of getting drawn properly, but had these issues where essentially we had things processing an object, but then modifying the projectile list and vice versa, causing some issues. And most notably, what we came upon is that there was a problem where is it? So this code that was checking with the player collision, this was assuming that it was for projectiles, and as a result, it was then incorrectly jumping to entity projectile complete even for objects, which then was kind of making this whole weird sequence of events that made the game look like it was locking up for certain things. So it was it was sort of a challenging thing to get resolved, but we've gotten there. Looking at this now, we still want to be able to call check player collision in order to be able to ensure that the enemies can collide with the player. I think what we want to do, though, is change. We want to change this to a subroutine so that it can be called without having to worry about what type of thing called it to know where to jump back. I mean, I guess... I don't know. I guess there are probably ways that you can set memory and jump to that memory, and that memory contains the instruction for jump and, you know, to the appropriate location of the code that you wanted. But at that point, you're basically writing a subroutine just without using the stack. So it doesn't really buy you much. And then about the only thing that kind of needs to change. So right now, let's see. So right now we have trying to think of if this would work. So right now we're hard coding that we're checking the object, the player object against an entity in the projectiles list, and really what we want to do is we want to change that so that the what we're checking against is whatever the appropriate entity is. So the first question I guess I have is, like, is it possible... So the way we would do some sort of flexible lookup functionality, we had talked about this last time when I had written some code that, you know, I had assumed would work, and then I realized that we were trying to do essentially a dereference of a pointer, you know, but using X, which is not actually possible in the way that I wanted to do. And so what we ended up having to do was scrap that code and essentially rewrite it a little bit differently. So the issue here is we have, let's say we have some sort of pointer that points to whichever list we're looking at. Well, I guess we could even simplify it. If we only have two... So what I would have done if this were, say, C, is you'd get the pointer to your list, right? You'd have some sort of... Your function would be defined at the top as something like, you know, check player collision, and you'd get an entity pointer, right? And then you'd get your player. And they just, you know, you check to see if they collide and take the appropriate steps. But the thing is that doing that is a little bit more tricky, because I don't think it's possible to do, like, if... What I'm wondering is, can I do something like, you know, projectile, let's say, entity pointer, and we want to... the entity pointer variable itself is the pointer to the memory of whatever the entity is, and then can we do this? I don't know if we can do that. I don't know if that actually makes sense to CC65, illegal addressing mode. Because the problem is that we don't just want, oh, wait a minute, like that, but, well, that makes even less sense. I mean, so we can do, yeah, so it doesn't know what entity pointer is, but this is totally considered acceptable. The issue is that what we want to do is something like, okay, we know we want to offset into the entity list based on the entity that's coming in for the call to check it against the player. But for the X position, it's offset by some amount. Is it possible to do something like... I wonder if it's possible to do something like this, where you say load the entity pointer and then you clear the carry and add this offset. Like, is that a thing that you can do? Because that would accomplish the same thing, and then we could have a temporary pointer that, you know, where we grab the base address and we do the add with carry, and then, you know, branch carry set to here, and then if this is, you know, if this is if the carry was no, branch carry clear. If the carry was set because we incremented past 255, then we would want to, so like we would have something called temp pointer, right? And then we'd clear carry and do this and store it into temp pointer, and then we'd increment temp pointer plus 1. Right, basically take the pointer and then do the math to figure out where X position sits in there, and then once we're done with all of that, we can load A with temp pointer Y, right? And that would give us our X value. So it's a little bit more complex because we got to find where we actually want to read that versus here where it's taking the address and adding it. Now that's sort of the super flexible way of doing it. But the other thing we could do is, because we know it's either a projectile or an object, we could just, I think this is probably the easier way to do it. We just say load a T1 and then compare it to 0 and branch not equal to this, and then this is load objects no, just the X register, please, and then jump to X loaded, and otherwise it does it from projectiles, and then this is X loaded here, and then just use T1 to determine if we're dealing with an object or a projectile, so that in all of this code, I mean, the thing that I don't like about it is that obviously you then have to deal with the check, the comparison every time. Versus where the pointer, it's generic and it knows how to handle it, where regardless of where the list is, you could have 10 lists if we wanted to, if we had enough memory to. I mean, how many places are we actually grabbing this data? once we're clearing it out. I mean, you know, a few places. So, I don't know. Feels wrong to do it this way, just from a flexibility perspective, but at the same point, it also feels kind of like a waste to deal with having to do all that pointer math, assuming that that actually works the way that I want it to. One thing we can do to check that before we go into any of this stuff, if I just back out this change, right? In the beginning of the game, right before we do any of our initial, or, well, let's do it right after we clear out our memory. Simple thing we can do to test out if what I wanted to do works is you should be able to do this, and it should give you a value. It should give you the offset of what X position is in that struct. So if we go into the debugger and we look at the code, so let's see what this does when we reset the game. So that was 0. Does that just happen to be the 0 offset in the struct? Could be. Could be. I chose a bad. Yeah, that was not the best value to choose there. So let's say Y. That should give us 1, and then we can try X. Well, let's try XV. That's going to be more interesting because there are a few bytes there in the struct before that. And like I said, this is purely just to see if this would work. I don't see why it wouldn't, but this is getting a little bit beyond some of the stuff I've done in CA65. So, all right, so it loaded the offset 0. So this would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that, yeah, that does work. So we could do it that way. Well, you know, let's do that. Let's do it that way, and then if it turns out to be overkill, we can always change it. It's not really a huge change to make. So this is going to require entity pointer, which is just a it's a word for the address, so we're reserving that. And then we'll have another one called temp pointer, which is what we're going to actually use to do the math. And then let's check player collision. Let's make this right. We don't need that right now. Okay, so this is a subroutine now instead of a just a straight, you know, just a bunch of code that we're calling. So let's add some documentation here. So entity pointer contains address of entity list that is being sourced. X is the current offset in the entity list. And I think that's it. I don't think we need anything else. We know we're checking the player on the one side of that check. So what we want to do is we want to transfer Y to A and push A, because we want to make sure that we are preserving that value. We're going to be modifying that, and transfer X to A and push A, because we may be modifying that as well. Let's make sure. Okay, so there's nowhere else that we were returning back, so let's reverse this process here. Let's just also push A just for good measure. So A will be, so this was what we pushed on, so A will be the last thing off the stack. So what we want to do is pull A, transfer A to X, and then pull A, transfer A to Y, and then pull A, and we've reversed out the stack, and then we're going to do the return. Okay. And then, now that we have that, the first thing we're going to want to do is transfer X to A and then transfer A to Y, because we're going to use Y for our... Actually, do we need to do that? I guess we do, because that's going to be our... Well, let me think about that for a second. If we're not getting the value, if we're just getting... Actually, then we don't really care, because... Sorry, I'm just thinking through how we want to do that. So, in the call, we have X as the value of the offset into the list. So entity pointer will be the pointer to the list. So we do need... We do need the Y, but we're going to increment the base pointer based on the value that we're getting from the struct. Okay, so we're just checking to make sure that we actually have the player here. All right, so that's all good. So now, like we were doing before, we're going to store the upper byte of the entity pointer into temp pointer +1, because we're going to do math on the base, on the lower byte of entity pointer. So let's load entity pointer and then store it into temp pointer. And then, well, we don't even need to do that yet, because we're going to do some math. So we've loaded A with that. We're going to clear carry. We're going to add carry to entity, X position, and then we're going to store it. And then branch of carry is clear to this next label. If it's set, then what we need to do is increment temp pointer +1, because we've carried. And so then we have what we need in temp pointer, and we're using Y now to do the offset. So Y will be the offset. So it's a little bit backwards, right, from how we were doing it before, because, and I'll draw a diagram to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. So the way that we were doing it before is we had this... We had an address, right? That was the projectiles list, and we were saying, okay, add whatever this address is add, you know, the point in the structure, right? So we're adding xpos to it in this case. So we have our address, and then we're saying, okay, and now offset by x, right? So take x and add that further, and that's our, you know, final address that we're loading from. So it's a little strange the way we're doing it here, or actually it's not. I mean, it's not that totally different. It's just because we have to break it up into pieces. It seems sort of backwards thinking about this now. So we're saying, okay, we have this address pointer that we're going to add the x position offset to, right? And that gives us our final address in temp pointer. And then we're saying, okay, and now index it by y. So add the address that's in here, or add the address that this references to y, and then we should get our value that we want to, you know, get. Hopefully I explained that clearly. It's a little bit tricky to explain properly. You know, ultimately it should equate to the same thing. I could be totally wrong and this won't work, but I'm thinking this is going to be right. And if not, we'll step through it and see what actually happened, or if I made a misstep in how this is calculated. All right, so we're not going to go through the whole thing. We're not going to change the whole thing, because what I want to do, I just want to check this first attempt at calling it and see if that works. So enemy bullet, we're going to comment it out. We know that worked with the old implementation. Let's see, is this what I want to do it on? Yeah, so for the medium one, instead of it being included, now we're going to do a JSR check player collision. And while it's not going to be defined in there anymore, it's just going to be somewhere over here. Where do we have a good place that we can put it? I don't want to put it in there because that's all sort of the individual. Here, nah, that's a bad place for it too. I guess over here is as good as anything. So include check player collision asm. Oh, right. Have to give it a label. Okay. Oh, so the other thing is load a objects and then store it into entity pointer, load a objects, store a entity pointer. Let's just double check. I don't remember which one refers to the upper byte and the lower byte. Oh, and this should be +1. Okay. So where's CC65? Let's look at their documentation here real quick. Actually, it'll be faster to Google search it. Low byte. So low byte is to the left. I always somehow managed to reverse that. Okay. No reference. Suspicious address expression 34. This should be like that. Check player collision 17. Okay. Branch if equal to here, otherwise jump to that, and then move that. Same thing, it looks like. Wait, what? Range error. Why? Oh. Is this... If I remember correctly, one of the things I noticed last week, or whenever I was talking about this, is okay, yeah. So for this indirect, they have to be 0-page registers. You can't pointers, variables, whatever you want to call them. They can't be in the RAM. So we got to move this into the 0-page, which is okay. We have, I believe, we have plenty of space there for it. I just forgot about that. Okay, that took care of that. So let's go back to Messin. Let's look at the code and see what it does when we get there. I assume that it should be okay, but this is kind of the first time I'm messing with some of this stuff, so let's just step through and verify instead of making all these changes and then determining, yeah, you know what, that's not actually going to work. Okay. So, check player collision. So, entity pointer 1. It's 2FC. Okay. That makes sense, because that would be where that would live for the object. So, load entity pointer +1, and that gives you 2. You store it in temp pointer +1. Good. Then load, and that's FC, clear carry, add the X position, store it into temp pointer. Good. Carry is clear because it didn't go past FC. Load a temp pointer Y, so that would give us the X position of the flyby. Okay, and that looks like a reasonable value. 89. Let's see, 89 in hex. 137, so somewhere towards the middle of the screen, and that makes sense because the medium enters where the low altitude projectile comes in and goes off the screen. So that looks good, which means that we would want to change the rest of these now. So okay, so let's do that. All right, so same, let's load a this. Okay, so then the other nice thing about this is we don't have to do anything different. We just say load from temp pointer Y again. And that gets stored. Okay, and we can use it again here because Y didn't get changed and temp pointer didn't get changed, so that's all good. Yet again, we can still do this. So far, this is working out pretty nicely. Okay. So now this is for the Y position. So now we're going to do the same thing we did before, right? So we're going to load a entity pointer +1. We're going to store it into temp pointer +1. We're going to load a entity pointer. We're going to clear the carry. We're going to add with carry the offset of entity Y position. And then we are going to store that into temp pointer, and then we are going to branch if carry is clear to pass this. Otherwise, we're going to increment temp pointer +1 because we carried. And now that we have carried or not, and we've incremented temp pointer or not, y has what we want in it, so we are just going to take temp pointer and y. And then same thing here. Nope, not that one. This one. Let me just take this. Okay. Yeah, so compare that to that. Branch carry set billet height, load a temp. This is still the Y position. So that's good. That's the player Y position. This is all good. Now this is the only other part that gets a little tricky, is that we now need to update the type and data. So let's group these together just so visually they're all together. So we're storing that into the objects, data, and timer. That's for the player because the player was destroyed. And in this case, we are now going to have to change temp pointer to point to 3 different locations: type, data, and timer. So load a entity pointer +1, store it into entity pointer +1. Nope, temp pointer +1. Load a entity pointer, clear carry, add carry, entity type, store it into temp pointer, branch carry clear to here, increment temp pointer +1, and then we want to store the value into temp pointer y. And then this is all basically the same. Just kind of annoying that we have to do these offsets repeatedly, but that's okay. That's not that big a deal. So that was for data. And then that is timer. And there may be a better way to do this where we don't have to. I mean, I'm thinking that if it really came down to it and that was particularly slow, we could do something like, we know that type comes first, then data, then timer. We could easily just increment entity pointer 1 by 1, or even increment y. That would actually work pretty nicely, provided that y doesn't overflow 255. Either of those options would work well, but let's just leave it for now because this is the most straightforward approach to this. So let's see if this broke anything in terms of, okay, well, it added some range problems. Okay, so that got rid of those range problems. Let's see how badly this got broken now. Should be interesting. All right, so what we want to do is I want to get rid of this for now and just see. All right, so that was not exactly what I wanted it to do. It did seem to cause the medium ship to collide. Are we still calling check player collision somewhere besides? Let's see. We're including it here. We're jumping to it here. Okay. So medium is calling this and then jumping. Strange that so many of those medium objects are getting spawned. It's not supposed to happen. So let's see what the script has to tell us about our entity list here. So it keeps adding those 7s. Now 7s are what? I assume those are the medium. Those are the medium, so they're being added over and over again. Did I remove? Oh, yeah. Okay, so, so that should be doing a jump to the projectile entity complete now that it's not, calling that subroutine, or it's entity projectile complete. That was happening within check player collision, which was part of the problem. So that should be called now separately from doing the check. Yeah, that's way more. Okay, yeah, that looked right. Hey, Banshaku, how's it going? Thanks for saying hi. Yeah, I know you said Fridays are well, Friday my time is tough for you because it's the weekend for you. So it's but I appreciate you coming by to say hi. All right, so other than the bounding box being kind of janky by a lot, and I don't know if that's because of this change or something else, but I mean, that's generally speaking the right behavior now. Okay, so that's cool. So the collision is a little bit off, but it is working properly now, and that was because of this. That was the problem with the enemy bullet. Busy on jukebox these days. Yeah, it's seems like a busy time of year for a lot of people, myself included. It's just trying to make sure that I get these streams done and the recording so that I can make progress on this game. I'm really shooting to get this done this year, but that may be a overly optimistic estimate here. So so now we should be able to call check player collision and then load, just like we're doing with the medium thing here. We actually just steal this code, right? but instead of objects, no, not entities, projectiles, which is the appropriate list for this thing. And then that should be it. That should allow the enemy bullets to destroy the player. Because you'll notice the bullets that were kind of streaming in from the top of the screen had no effect on the player. Well, it doesn't help when I get killed by the enemy ship here. So let me close the debugger and see if I can outmaneuver my own ships. Nope. All right. So now that... wait, what? Is there a bug where it still creates a ship? That was cool. So, wait, the bullet, when it collides with the player, spawns a medium ship? How does it do that? That's interesting. I don't remember programming that logic. Something else is going on. And it would help if I weren't constantly being killed by this thing. Okay. That is really strange. Okay, so we have those projectiles starting. We have a 3 and a 9. What is the 9? Oh, the enemy stream. Okay, yeah. Right, that's what's spawning those bullets. Okay. But that doesn't make sense. Where did that medium ship come from? Who's spawning that? All right, let's check some of the other code to make sure that it is properly returning at, or jumping at the end and not skipping like the enemy bullet was. Let's see, flyby is the other one. Entity object complete. Okay, that looks good. And then we can do the same thing here with it as we did with medium, right? Because we want to have it actually check the player collision to make sure that it didn't hit the player. All right, so that's that. What about enemy stream? Yeah, so that doesn't collide with the player, but it does spawn projectiles. Okay. That's just the cloud. The flyby is what's spawning those individual bullets. Clear object entity. Okay. Oh, you know what? I wonder... Well, so this isn't going to clear object entity or any of those, but that's... I guess that's okay. Doesn't hurt anything necessarily. So that's weird. What is... Let's take a look at what's going on maybe on the stack. Something will clue us into... no. let's see if we, okay, it's not like sitting there, doing any sort of strange, oh, my phone thinks I'm talking to it. Let me put it somewhere where it won't care if I'm talking to it or not. Yeah, let's see who's adding a map object for a medium thing. So the only thing that should be doing that is this guy. So let's low altitude projectile. Let's have a breakpoint there and see if the low altitude projectile is actually adding the medium. It could just be a bug in the way this works, but it seems more likely that it is some sort of issue with the pointer math or something along those lines where I am not properly offsetting some things, and then that's causing this to be added. Because it shouldn't, well, I say it shouldn't be, but it should be because I just messed up. All right, let's try again. Let's preemptively kill this thing. Yeah, okay, so like, why there is no low altitude projectile, right? That must be a bug in the flyby that even though it was getting destroyed, oh, I don't need, it doesn't even need this anymore. So that flyby should disappear when we destroy it. And the flyby type is... oh, it's called a scout now, right? I forgot. Should really rename it accordingly, but I'm not going to deal with that right now. It's not really even relevant to this at the moment. I just need to see... okay, so the scout is number 8. And we should see that in the list the number 8 is destroyed as soon as the bullet hits it. So it should be gone from the object list, and it is. But then... and then we get a low altitude projectile. What is 1? 1 is an explode. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then a 9 is an enemy stream, and that makes sense. And then we have 5s and 6s. So enemy bullet, low altitude projectile. How is it becoming a low altitude projectile when there's nothing that should be adding low altitude projectiles? Let's see. The only thing that should be adding low altitude projectiles is not the enemy stream, but this guy here. So let's see if it's still calling it, even though it's technically not a valid entity anymore. This, and load that, and we'll just put the breakpoint right there and restart. And okay, so it's a spontaneous generation of a low altitude projectile. Now, it seems to happen... I think... Where's the setback? That doesn't help me. Okay. So just basically walking backwards to figure out how that got added. Well, you know what we can do? So that's getting added to slot 2, right? No. Low altitude projectile is 6. So, really? What I'm going to do is put a breakpoint on the entity list and see where it's actually getting set in the code, but I gotta check which slot it's in. Screwed that up. Okay, so it's dead. It's in slot number 2. All right, so, or well, slot 1 index. So if we open up our memory, I think projectiles are at 200. And then I believe the offset for it, well, we should be able to just see it based on it being the number 6 just by itself. So we want to add a breakpoint on a right, and now we're going to reset and step through all the times where we initialize it to a certain value, and then get into the game. And okay, probably should have done it where we only watch for the change when it's 2, but that's all right. Or sorry, when it gets set to 6, but that's okay. Ah, damn it, I missed it. I'm gonna fire more bullets. All right. Oh, I'm missing. Damn it. I was ever so slightly off. Okay. It's fine. Add object entity. Who is adding what? Type 6. Type X. A is 5. Okay. All right. Destroy player N bullet. Okay, so it's miscalculating it here. Why? First of all, it's not even close, right? Like it hasn't. Okay, and then the reason that it's turning it into a low altitude projectile is because the value is not 0. Okay, that at least makes sense. So where is that code? Check player collision. So there it is. Okay, so the reason it's becoming a low altitude projectile is we are setting these values this way, but we are not doing this, which is important because A has a value in it before we go to do the store, which is not 0, which is a problem. So that should fix at least the problem of it spontaneously creating a low altitude projectile, which we don't want. All right, so we've rebuilt that, so we should see now less problem related to here, let's get rid of these, or let's turn these breakpoints off. I don't want to get rid of them. And see, we shouldn't see that happen anymore. Okay, so that's okay. That was more like what we expected. I should be able to destroy that thing, not see any low altitude projectiles get spawned. Okay, so there's still a problem with it incorrectly calculating collision with the player, but now it's not also getting this random behavior of things spawning in the entity list. Okay, so that's good. That is better. So now what we want to do, let's put a breakpoint in the collision detection for the player, where we will check to see what's going on with the actual comparison. We'll get to the point where it's going to turn the player into an explosion and then sort of backpedal through the code and see what actually got us there. That's why I like having emulators to do this. Can you imagine having to do this on real hardware and not being able to do this kind of testing? I'm pretty sure the real thing had, hardware debugging that was possible, but it, meant having it on a device and having it hooked up to your computer, and who knows how good it was. Certainly the PCs at the time were, more powerful than the NES was, but not like today, where you could emulate the entire thing on your PC and then do what we're doing here, checking out the memory and stepping forward and backward and whatnot, which is pretty amazing. So let's go backwards and let's see why it thinks it collided even though it shouldn't have. All right, so 9 is the offset, so we're at... Okay, that makes sense. I think let's go back. So this is an enemy bullet. All right, and so this is the first enemy bullet. No, this is the second enemy bullet because of X. So projectiles is the entity pointer. Okay. So that's... Oh, oops. No, I don't want to do that. I want to step into... Sorry, we're going to have to backtrack again the second time. Okay. So we're coming in, we're checking the player type, make sure the entity to make sure that it's actually the player in the first spot. It is. So we continue. We're loading the entity pointer +1 and storing in temp pointer. We're loading entity pointer. We're clearing our carry. We're adding X position, which is 0. And then we're storing it in temp pointer. And then there was no carry. So now we're taking the x value, the x position value. So the question I have is that really the right value? So if we're at 200 as the base pointer, and this is the projectile, okay, yeah, that's right. Oh, you know what? I can see what may have happened. It may be that it's thinking it collided because it hit the Y, the horizontal position, and we just have a bug in the way we're handling that. So let's see. Okay, so we're going to clear that, and then we're going to add 10 to it because we need to. We're storing the offset of the player width in temp, and then we're grabbing that value again. That seems wrong. Let me go back to the original source for a second and... Oh, well, it's the player, it's the bullet width. No, that would be okay. So temp 2 has the bullet width, which is the x position plus 8. But this, oh, you know what? That might be wrong because that's not the player's x position. That's the bullet's x position. Did I mess up that comparison here? Yeah. So okay. So that's the first problem. Is I sort of preemptively grabbed the pointer value here, but should have stuck with the exposition of the player. So let's go back to this code here. We checked if it's a player. If it's a player, we skip this jump, and then we can have this all set up, but we don't want to do this. What we want to do is we want to... This is objects plus entity x position, right? Because this is the player's x position that we're adding 16 to, and then we're getting the bullet's x position and adding 8 to it. So that would explain potentially why we're seeing that weird behavior. So then we're taking the player's x position and comparing it to the bullet's x position, and then based on the comparison, we're either checking against the width of the player versus the enemy x position, or we're done. So that all looks good now. Let's see, why didn't you... Right, because there's a substantial amount of change there. Okay, and then let's just double check what we've got here. So this is okay. This is okay. Any place where we're doing the entity without the load without the x, that should stay. But for... Okay, so that's good. This is with the x, so we go through the pointer math. Load a... Yep, that looks correct. All right, I think that looks better. That would explain why it was happening, because it was basically saying the x always matched. It was waiting for the y to reach, and then causing it to essentially immediately collide. So let's get rid of this thing right away, and then yes, and now we're not seeing that, and now we are colliding properly, or more or less correctly. It's a very coarse collision. The 16 by 16 bounding box is a little bit too big based on the shape of the ship, but now I can also collide with the medium ship, and that was cool. That worked the way it was supposed to. I destroyed that, and then if I get hit by that, I get destroyed. And let's see, now I should be able to also destroy the medium ships as they appear if I can fire fast enough. No? I don't know if it actually hit it or not. That's part of the problem with the ships coming from behind, is that they it's hard to hit them because their speed is a little bit faster than the bullet speed. Well, all right. Well, that looks pretty good. That we fixed the majority of the issues that were introduced by having these two lists now. So that's good. I'm happy with that. I'm gonna keep this one short again. I know I've had a few recently that were really long, so I figured better to keep some shorter ones in here. And like I said, episode 100, we're gonna have some sort of cool things finally happening with some things I've been talking about for a while related to the pre-order and whatnot. So I'll announce all of that on the Monday, not this coming Monday, which is the 25th. But it will be on April 1st. It will not be an April Fool's Day joke. These will be real things. You know, as always, thank you for watching. Thanks for joining the live stream. For those of you who are here watching, as always, if you want to reach me, I'm on Twitter at Clairvis. I'm on Nintendo Age as Zelius. You can add comments and questions to the video on YouTube. You know, feel free to email me, and keep an eye out for Zero Pages episode 4. And the Monday, April 1st stream. So thanks again for watching. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. And take care. See ya.